Good morning, hello and welcome. My name is Bhuvan. This is the Indian Express Explained, where we take a look at the important news that you ought to have a look at from the examination perspective. Okay, so let's get started without any further delay. This is where you go ahead and connect with me in case you have any particular questions related to what we discuss here today. Okay, or if you have any particular questions that arise out of the different facets that we'll seek to understand. Either ways, you get connected with me on this particular Instagram channel by scanning on this barcode, right? So the first topic that I have for you today is breaking. In fact, last evening only we had articles on this come up. Okay, Coder Yadavji, good morning, welcome. So last evening we had this news breaking. So it's a very pertinent topic. So let's take a look at the facts of the matter first. Okay, and then we'll understand the different consequences, the challenges, what is being done in other countries, what is the way forward. We'll take a look at all of that. But first, the basics. So SEBI has barred a particular financial influencer whom we will now know as a fin-influencer. Okay. So that particular individual and his whole, say, business, it has been barred from the securities market, and well, 17 crores is now to be put in an escrow account. Essentially, it is to be recovered from that individual. Okay. So now, this particular individual with the handle BAP of chart, so we are just going to call it BOC first. So BOC has been barred from accessing the securities market. Now, disgorgement of 17.2 crores for indulging in what essentially? Unregistered investment advisory. Okay. First, understand the basics. So we are a country of what? 140 crore people plus. Okay. And now you must have seen the ad nowadays that, oh, out of these, say, X number of people have mobile phones. Yet what you find is, say, a smaller number than X is what people invest in mutual funds or invest in shares. So go ahead, invest in shares. That is that particular ad that is running, correct? So which is fine. You know, it's a call to go ahead and say explore another financial instrument, another financial avenue. But the problem is that say financial literacy is not very high. Okay. In fact, it is less than 6% of the global average. You know, forget the educational literacy that we talk about. In terms of financial literacy, India's position is in fact less than 6%, lesser than the global average, which means that, well, you need to have adequate protection. Okay. Adequate protection needs to be given to the common individual so that his or her money is not usurped by, say, unscrupulous individuals or organizations. Okay. So with that particular goal in mind, now you have had, say, the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019 and 20, or whenever was it, okay? So you had the COVID-19 pandemic, people had eventually savings that lined up. They eventually found a way to go ahead. You had proliferation of these apps that you could go ahead and access the trading market. So people went ahead. First time investors came up, huge numbers. And so to serve the needs of these first time investors, their financial knowledge gap that existed, that needed to be filled up. So you had this proliferation of individuals from, I'm not going to take names, there's no point. But then this host of individuals came up, giving you free advice, giving you advice, breaking down complex numbers in layman terms, making that understanding of the share market very easy for you. So thus, well, they eventually gained cult status. If you go ahead and say, find and look at the subscriber numbers of these individuals, vis-a-vis, say, the other registered bodies, it's nothing, it's tenfold. So this is the problem, that you have certain individuals who firstly have a lot of power and they are misusing that power to go ahead for their own benefits, So it's not like, say, advising for the trade market is wrong. In fact, under SEBIs, you have a particular instrument of investment advisors and research analysts. Okay. Two kinds of, say, individuals or organizations may exist. So if you want to go ahead and gain some sort of, say, input or advice or tip as to how you should go ahead and trade and invest, well, then there are these sets of individuals that are provided by the SEBI, and so they are to be registered with SEBI. So here it is. There is a mechanism that exists. So if there is a conflict of interest ever, so if there is a conflict of interest, you will find, well, these individuals will tell you, will let you know in a fair manner that, well, here is the conflict of interest, which is why, say, I will not be able to advise you on this. But then these financial influencers are not registered with SEBI. they are free from this obligation of, say, disclosure of conflict of interest. And so how has that been misused now? So for example, you have instances where, say, a particular stock X, okay? So you have a group of individuals who goes, buys it, say it was 100 rupees before, they go ahead, buy it, the stock price goes up to 150. Then this financial influencer comes in with his cult status, this large number of individuals, okay? And this is, by the way, from the SEBI website. So you have this large number of individuals who follow this particular financial influencer. The financial influencer tells them, go ahead, invest in stock X. It's going to see a lot of profit in the coming days, right? So thus you find that, well, eventually it is these sets of individuals who had bought the stock earlier. They dump their stocks, okay, eventually get the money that they require, and it is the common man who's lost their money. So several such instances exist. You also have instances of, well, in this trading market, you have something called P&L sheets or the profit and loss sheets. Okay, so they'll tell you, say, the general trend of a particular company. How good or how bad is it doing? Based on that, you can make your assessment and say invest your money. Okay. Now you have had individuals who went ahead and morphed such or changed, edited such profit and loss sheets, shared it with this group of individuals, this large group of first-time investors hungry for knowledge, looking for some sort of advantage over the traditional big players. Okay. And thus you find that today, see, the major platforms that you think of, say Zerodha or Grow or whatever app that you might be using, all of them kind of focus on, say, having legitimate profit and loss sheets, so that this is not misused so as to go ahead and, misinfluence a particular set of individuals to lose their money eventually. So the problems of financial influencers is not just in terms of filling this knowledge gap, but then those financial influencers using that particular subscriber base that they have, okay? And then if they get paid for it, if there is a particular Telegram channel, for example, where the entry is based on a payment, and therein I am sharing, say, particular tips with you, and without that obligation of me as an advisor to you vis-a-vis SEBI, then that's a problem, wouldn't you say so? Correct? यादव जी, नहीं यादव जी, वो तो मेरा हो गया, मेरी बारी तो अब नहीं है. Right? Okay. So it is also alleged, well, that this particular individual was luring clients, investors through misleading or false information. You see? So all of this was what? Eventually misinformation was being done in a country where financial literacy is low. So that was eventually a problem. So before we go ahead, let's understand about SEBI first, because it's very important that you understand, say, SEBI not just as an organization, but when you compare it to, say, the other regulatory bodies of, say, securities around the globe. How does SEBI work? Okay. So what you find is, firstly, it's a statutory body. It's set up by an act of the parliament in 1992, and it looks to protect the interest of investors. This is its primary job. On the, say, other side, it obviously takes a look at those who are putting their money in, So then the brokers, the capitalists, all of them are to be regulated. Those stakeholders who are playing in the market, SEBI has absolute control over how they regulate, how they function. Okay. Headquarters in Mumbai, regional offices for across the country. Then you have local offices that have come up, right? So you have a chairman, then you have full-time and part-time members. You have representation from RBI. You have representation from Finance Ministry, correct? So as to maintain that particular, well, you can say oversight of the government, even though it's an autonomous organization, it cannot go ahead and say function in complete autonomy. There needs to be checks and balances, which is why you have representation from these two particular agencies, institutions. And the appeals against the decisions of SEBI lies with the Securities Appellate Tribunal, where you, again, it has a power of a civil court. Okay. And as a body, when you look at it, it has quasi-judicial, quasi-executive, and quasi-legislative powers, which means it can go ahead and frame laws, frame rules and regulations for itself. It can go ahead and implement those particular rules and regulations and, say, give judgments and hear cases against those judgments. You see, end to end has been given insofar as SEBI is concerned. Correct? Now, when you go ahead and understand, say, the recent issues, now that I've given you the same story from, say, COVID-19, the influx of more money, disposable money in hands of people, thus that, say, propensity to invest in share market, okay, in securities market. And then you have, because this knowledge gap exists, right? So this, you have these financial influencers who have come up. If you look at, this is the reason. And thus you find the challenges have now arisen out of their proliferation. Because they have come up, now we need to look at the challenges. So when you look at the challenges, recently in 2023, okay, on the SEBI website, this is what is put up. So I want you to have a look at it first. It's a consultation paper on Association of SEBI registered intermediaries, which is exactly, say, what I told you about right now, say the research analysts or my investment advisors, right? Them with the unregistered entities, including financial influencers. So you see what is being done? So your regulated individuals should not go ahead and interact with these financial influencers. Okay. So a consultation paper for that has been put up. Now, when you look at the whole interaction between these three particular agencies, very key to understand this. One is SEBI, the other is financial influencers, okay, and the third is, say, your public, okay, and then you have, say, your registered advisors, your investment advisors, okay. This relationship is unregulated right now. This relationship is regulated right now. The focus is on making sure that this particular relationship is quickly regulated. Why? Because this is completely, say, free from consequence right now. You can go ahead, take a particular advice from a particular financial influencer, you lose your money. And if that particular person gains money through cash or non-cash methods, then you do not have any chance of justice there. But in case of a research advisor, at least you will be aware of the consequences, you will be made to know of what exactly you are getting into. Okay. So right now, as of now, there is no particular law that governs this relationship. Yes. There is no specific law that governs financial influencers in our country. Okay. Now, there are two acts that you need to be aware of. Broadly, even if you look at the legality part of it, financial influencers are covered under two acts. Number one being the SEBI Act 1992, which set up the SEBI. Yes, this is the parent act of SEBI as a body. And number two is the Unfair Trade Practices Regulations 2003 regulation. Both of these talk about this conflict of interest, this responsibility that you have towards your investor, towards the money, who's putting their money in. Okay. So you cannot break that, say, handshake of faith that you are doing. Okay. So these two you need to be aware of. Investment advisors that I just told you, they can go ahead and advise both individuals as well as companies. Okay. So this facility is available to both. Now, this is being done why? Like I told you, the pump and dump scheme. Why is SEBI cracking down on, say, financial influencers? Because you had a particular state, a particular share, its value was inflated, financial influencer gets the money, the person who put their money lose everything, right? So this is what? This breach of faith, this is in fact a malpractice, yes. So this is the whole concept here, right? So we have understood, say, the relationship between SEBI and financial influencers in depth today, okay? Now when you look around the globe, okay, let's look around the globe and see what are the other provisions regarding this. Who is doing what? Because this can't be an India-specific problem only. Correct? So in Australia, in fact, Australia has one of the most stringent provisions when it comes to this financial influencers domain. Okay? It is an offense there, in fact, to carry out an unlicensed financial service business. You know, if you carry out an unlicensed financial service business, yes, so then you risk not just imprisonment of up to, say, I believe 2 years, but you also get a huge fine. Correct? This is the Australian example that you need to be aware of. Okay? And then there is a threshold also. So how do you go ahead and, say, determine who is a financial influencer? Okay? Who is a financial influencer is also a very important definition, because let's understand, say, some people, if it is just by subscriber base, then you need to have an absolute number, and that number needs to have some sort of logic. Otherwise, this is a very vague entity right now. some individuals may be a part of the larger domain of financial influencers. So let's understand the Australian definition of financial influencer now. Okay. Simple, not a very difficult, say a particular threshold. Okay. If the influencer's compensation or say other benefits, right? If the compensation and the benefits the influencer gets, okay, if it is dependent on the behavior of his subscribers or his audience, right, then that construes as a financial influencer. Please understand this. Compensation, which means any form of monetary benefit or benefits which could be non-cash, right? So you get, say, a free laptop in exchange for going ahead and influencing the behavior of your subscriber base of, say, 1.5 lakh. If you have done that, then that classifies as a financial influencer. And if you are a financial influencer who is unregistered, and if you have done this particular, say, offense, then you are going to jail. Got it? This is the Australian definition of financial influencer, which, again, by the way, right now, like I told you, India does not have a particular central definition. So a case so arises that will you go ahead and probably replicate this Australian definition, fine-tune it to the Indian market, and then eventually have a definition that tells us what exactly is a financial influencer and how exactly are you going to deal with them. Okay? Right? Let's look at these questions, guys. What you're going to do is answer and leave your answers for me in the comment box below. Sure, Yadav ji. Why don't you reach out to me on my Telegram ID? उधर बात करते हैं आराम से, फुर्सत में आराम से. We can discuss about your first attempt for sure. आप हमको एक बार कनेक्ट करिए वहीं पे. ठीक है? Question number 1. Part A. Chairman of SEBI is nominated by Government of India. True or false? Statement 2. RBI has no representation on the SEBI board. Identify the correct statements. Question number 2. Okay. Investment advisors are registered with SEBI. And statement B. The 2023 consultation paper discourages, this is investment advisors, from any form of association with financial influencers. Identify the incorrect statements. Okay. Please leave your answers for me in the comment box like you have been doing so far. Right. A very quick announcement before we go forward. So the optional batches are closing. In fact, even though the validity shows here as 25th of October, well, the person in charge, I had a word with him and he told me that, well, the links are still open. So if you are considering going ahead and say preparing your optional with StudyIQ in the subjects Anthro, PubAd, History, Mathematics, okay, Geography, Sociology, PSIR, Philosophy, Hindi, Sahitya, well, firstly look at the faculty profile, okay. But before anything else, firstly decide what's going to be your optional. Many students I interact with are still, say, not clear of their optional, you know. So here is a very simple method how you should say go ahead and say choose your optional. 5 minutes I'll tell you. Okay. First, look at the syllabus. Okay. Look at the syllabus. What exactly is the syllabus telling you? Can you understand certain keywords from there? Are you able to at least tell yourself that, okay, अब आज के दिन में इस पे क्या 200 शब्द लिख सकता हूँ? After that, look at the previous year's questions. Therein see, can you at least go ahead and form basic bullet points for certain questions? Do you have at least a fair, rough idea? Or do you have at least the interest in the particular subject to have an idea? Okay. And thereafter, look at the NCERTs, the fundamental texts for your optionals. Okay. Do this process. Scientifically choose your optional. Don't go ahead and choose your optional because X told you, Y told you, Z told you. That makes no sense. Okay. Because if you choose your wrong optional, you are essentially putting at risk your one entire attempt. Okay. So be very scientific in the way you go ahead and choose your optional. And once you have decided that, yes, okay, geography is going to be my optional, right? I like reading geography. I can go ahead and say understand and read it at length for a year at least. Then go ahead and decide whether you want to do it yourself or you want guidance. If you want to go do it yourself, all the best. If you seek guidance, go ahead and look at the faculty profiles of StudyIQ faculties for geography. Understand where they come from, what's their approach. Okay. And then when you go ahead and decide to sign up, use the code BALIVE, BALIVE. Why? That assures you a substantial discount firstly. And then you embark and make sure that at least before 31st of December, you know, at least you have completed 50% of both papers. This is the bare minimum. Okay. Ideally, you should be completing a lot more of your optional paper before 31st of December. then only you can say you have substantially given yourself a good chance to prepare and say appear for next year. Okay. So this is the small break, the small say information that I had for you. Right. Okay. Let's look at this case now. The Mahua Moitra case. Okay. Today, in fact, well, the submissions are going to be made before the ethics committee of the House. Okay. So let's go ahead and understand them point by point. Firstly, how serious are Nishikant Dubey's accusations? If you have not been aware of this case, so well, you have had a particular member of parliament who has been accused of going ahead and asking questions on the floor of the House at the behest of a private body. Okay. There is also accusation that that particular individual, that particular member of parliament has given their particular login ID and password of their Lok Sabha access, yes, to this particular private body, this particular private individual, right? So these are the accusations. So now, how serious are they? Firstly, if there has been a monetary exchange or again a non-cash exchange in return for asking questions, then that is obviously a grave accusation. And in that case, the question first arises that whether this whole entire part is inquiry should have gone to the ethics committee or should it have gone to the privileges committee. Okay. This is the first question. Okay. An offense like this, who takes charge first? Now, the ethics committee, for example, there is a recent example, the newspaper article quotes that you had a member of parliament who went abroad, okay, with a woman, right, claiming that the woman was his wife, but actually it was his girlfriend. Okay. So this is one particular situation that had come up before the House. Then there is another where the member of parliament took a woman and the child, claiming that they are a family, but actually they were not a family. Okay. So now, in this case, what you found was that the case was referred to the ethics committee. And in this case, the case was referred to the privileges committee. Why? Because firstly, this is misrepresentation of facts here, and this is a direct, say, offense under the Passports Act. Okay. So the non-serious accusations are normally taken care of by the ethics committee. Whereas in this case, if there has been a monetary transaction in return for asking questions, then that becomes, say, a breach of privilege. Okay. That's a contempt of the House, the honor of the House. In which case, it's a fit case for the privileges committee also to consider. Okay. So now once you understand this, let's go ahead and understand the rest of the accusations. So is the ethics committee the right forum for such a matter? Well, there is the other option. You could have the privileges committee also, okay, which takes care of, well, the breach of privilege, okay, as well as, say, the contempt of the House. Okay. Right, so like I told you, first, now has there been an allegation earlier about a member of parliament handing over access to parliament website to someone else? So let's understand the process. How does a parliamentary question travel? Okay, so you have a member of parliament who has been given a form. They write their question in the form. It is duly signed, okay, and then it is delivered to the House. It could be delivered in person by someone else also, but it is essentially in a form, in a closed, say, envelope. Now, this online submission is something that has come up recently, very recent. So what you find is that for online submissions so far, okay, there is no particular clear guideline. Okay, no guideline exists right now, and thus you find that, well, this may essentially be falling in the gray zone. Okay, so right now you can go ahead and say a member of parliament can submit their questions online, and they can also submit via form. Both exist, but a clear direction is laid down only for this and not for this. Okay, so therein is, say, the or the, say, legal gap that you might so call. Okay. Is there a rule that specifically bars members from giving their parliament login ID to a third person? Well, right now, as of now, no. Okay. As of now, there is no clear guideline, no clear policy that is laid down by the Lok Sabha insofar as dealing with this Lok Sabha access is concerned. However, prima facie, if you are giving your official ID and password to a third party and other entity, a private entity, then that is obviously must be breaking some other rule of the government of India for sure. Okay, 100%. Right. So now what will happen once the committee starts its proceedings? Right now, it will call all the stakeholders. The ethics committee, it will call all the stakeholders. Okay. You will have, eventually, the defendant will have the right to be heard also. Okay. The defendant has the right to be heard and cross-examine the witnesses. Yes, cross-examination is also allowed. Eventually, the ethics committee will come up with its report, which it will submit to the House. The House will go ahead and take it into consideration, and it can go ahead and either accept, reject, or modify the contents of the report, the recommendations of the report. Okay. This is the way in which this entire process will unfold in the coming days. Okay. Can the committee refer to an investigative agency like CBI, police? No, not at all. It is just going to give recommendations to the House. That's all. Okay. Nothing else is to be done by the committee so far. Right? Well, ethics committee has an absolute majority of the ruling party. Well, that is the case with most committees, except say the public account committee. Okay. Which is essentially to go ahead and look at the policy framework. Okay. If you know what public account committee is, it essentially looks at the application of the law, application of the policy, the prudence of the policy rather than the policy itself. Okay. One thing that you need to know, that it looks at the prudence of the policy. Correct? A particular policy by the government of India, it will look at the prudence of it rather than the policy itself. Okay. This is not its particular scope. Okay. And thus you can find, but generally by common sense you can understand that no minister can be part of this. Okay. Similarly, ministers cannot be part of the public undertakings committee. Okay. Not allowed. Why? Because this is essentially the checks and balances that you talk about. So you can't have the same individual as the check and the balance also. True? Correct? And can a member of parliament appeal a potentially adverse decision against the ethics committee or the House recommendations in a court of law only on certain conditions? Number one, that there was something unconstitutional. For example, this natural justice that we talk about, principle of natural justice, the right to be heard, if that is not followed, if the decision is delivered ex parte, ex parte means that the person was not present. Okay. Or if some say legality, a glaring loophole is there in this entire process, then obviously you have a right of appeal. Otherwise, no. Okay. So this is the whole case. The ethics committee, look at it. The primary role of ethics committee to oversee and maintain the moral and ethical conduct of members of the parliament. Okay. You also find a code of conduct, by the way, 1964. A code of conduct for members of parliament, also for the ministers, all of them, that it's a self-regulated, they are making a code for themselves. Okay. Ethics committee in Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha has 15, Rajya Sabha has 10. Rajya Sabha had the first one when it came to the ethics committee in 1997. Okay. In 2000, you had the ethics committee that came up in the Lok Sabha. Okay. These are the functions of this committee. It can recommend, but it can only recommend. That's all. Eventually, it's the House that takes the decisions on the recommendations of the committee. Okay. So this is some part of the code of conduct, guys. The code of conduct for MPs. And so have a look at it here. This particular one. Members should not never expect or accept any fee. Right? They should never have any monetary gains or non-monetary gains for anything that they do on the floor of the House. So if you go ahead and say, ask a question in return for monetary or non-monetary gains on the floor of the House, well, that obviously is a breach of privilege. It's a clear case of contempt of the House too. Okay, let's look at these questions. Question number 3 for you. Pranjul, good morning, no problems. Coder, you are absolutely correct. Yadavji, this is my ID. Bhuvan, StudyIQ. Go ahead and reach out to me. जो भी issues हो वहीं बात करते हैं. Okay. Question number 3. Ethics committee, privileges committee, estimates committee, rules committee. Which of the above have a total of 15 members? Okay. Go ahead and let me know. I'll give you a small hint. One of them has 30 members. Identify which one also. Okay. One of them has 30 members. I've given you a small hint. Let's see if that helps out. Question number 4, part A. No minister can be a part of the Committee of Public Accounts and Committee on Public Undertakings. True or false? And part B, Committee on Public Accounts can question the policy as well as the application of the policy. Identify the incorrect statements for me. ठीक है, चलिए आगे बढ़ते हैं. This is where you go ahead and connect, by the way, Yadavji. Right, so the questions from the last class now. Let's look at them one by one. Vienna Convention is legally binding on the states that have ratified it is true. Absolutely, it is legally binding. United Nations has, well, the same number. United Nations and Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, a total of, if I am not wrong, 193 countries have agreed to both of them equally. Okay, so it's the same number. So the incorrect statement here being B only. Right? Okay, blue passport, it is all yours until you go ahead and clear the civil services. Red passport, if you go ahead and get IFS. White passport, if you are an IAS, IPS, IRS, whichever the service, and if you are going as a senior official of the government of India to some conference or some place outside, you will be given a white passport. An orange passport, well, if you do not go ahead and clear your class 10th, yes, then you will be given an orange passport. So the incorrectly matched here being B, C, and D. Right? Question number 3. Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974 and Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981. The CPCB, which is the Central Pollution Control Board under the MOEFCC, right? It is entrusted with application of which of the above? So last class we had discussed that the Central Pollution Control Board takes care of two forms of pollutions in our country. One is air pollution, the second is water pollution, right? And that power it derives from these two particular acts. So which means both being correct here. Okay. CPCB implements both the National Air Monitoring Program and National Water Quality Monitoring Program, obviously. Just as I told you right now, two forms of pollution it takes a very keen interest in. Okay. PM 2.5 can enter the bloodstream. PM 10 affects the lungs. Yes, because it is much more thinner, much more minute than say PM 10. It can even enter our bloodstreams, and thus it has more life-threatening potential than say PM 10. So the correct statements here being both A and B. Right, so this particular passage, by the way, I was happy with the response to this particular question. Okay, so when you look at the whole paragraph, so the first paragraph, okay, what I find is Sadagopan Ramesh, what he is talking about. So I had asked you for the tone of the passage, the tone of the first paragraph. So when you look at some words that I want you to have a keen interest in, okay, firstly, I felt it was part of it to be like a hero. The noise when I got off the mark gives me goosebumps, right? He's comparing it to frenzy and hysteria. Would you say that, well, the tone is slightly nostalgic? Correct? The tone of the first paragraph is slightly nostalgic because he is reminiscing about the past. Okay? And when you look at the overall paragraph, so I'd asked you about the central idea, right? So this is essentially what? इसको बोलते हैं हिंदी में भूमिका बांधना. They are setting the, say, background for what exactly is going to happen. Why is this important? Because this explains the relevance of the next paragraph. Okay, wherein they say, well, this feel-good factor, it could be a catalyst for what is a key set of games. Why? Because, well, Pakistan has to keep their semi-finals hope intact, and they are playing at a place which can generate an atmosphere like this, right? So the central idea of this entire passage being that Pakistan's World Cup dreams will be determined in Chennai, correct? And a more specific would be, and say Chennai's crowd participation, you know, that they will be the one who will create that atmosphere which will add to the significance of this already tight scenario, right? So this is how you go ahead and understand central idea and themes and the tones of the passages. Right, so these were my star individuals who answered the questions of the last class correctly. User Harshit Crystal, Pooja, Bhagyashri, Coda, Lekam, Your Neighbor, Akhil, Shubham, Vaishnavi, Ayush, Aditya, Gatso, Rahul and Akshay. Good job, guys. I'm quite happy and impressed with the participation of most of you. Okay, in fact, all of you. Now, a small announcement before I close the class. So on my Telegram channel, okay, you will find that I've made an announcement for a giveaway that I'm doing for books, okay, of books in fact. And so if you would like to have one of those books, well, there's a small assignment. Head over to my Instagram channel, in fact, okay, goes by the same name of Bhuvan StudyIQ. Head over there. There is a giveaway post wherein I have asked you a question that you have to answer me in 50 words or less. The question being, which policy would you like to change and why? Okay. So the 5 best answers. Earlier I thought I'll give away 3 books, but well, I'll give away 5 books. What's it? It's the same thing. It's the students who should benefit. So go ahead and answer this question for me. Which policy would you change and why? Okay. So it is open till the 27th. 28th, I'll go ahead and announce, well, the 5 individuals who will receive the books as part of this giveaway. All right. On that note, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you answer the questions that I've put before you. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. in the next class of Indian Express Explained. Thanks for watching. Have a